Hi, troops. My name is Jeff Evely. I'm the Ops Sgt-Maj with Veterans for Freedom. I'm back with you now. We have our Ops O, Andrew MacGillivray, here with us. Andrew was he recently retired from the military, and he has a background that's really made him very conversant with some of our recruiting practices. And some other woke nonsense that's been going on in the military there. So this is kind of something that we've been meaning to get to for a while. I think it's very near and dear to anybody's heart who has been serving, especially in the last 10 years. We really hope that maybe we can shed some light on just how dire a situation we have on our hands with Canada's military at this particular moment in our history. But without further ado, I think I'll just kind of hand things over to my subject matter expert, my SME, Andrew MacGillivray here. Drew, take it away.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for having me. So just quick background on myself. Like Jeff said, I retired last year in August from the Canadian Armed Forces. And it's about, I think, it was 12 years that I served on the dot. Pretty experienced guy of over 500 days at sea, 3 high readiness deployments. I was the team lead for at the time it was called the Maritime Tactical Operations Group. I took the 3rd team out the door, and then I was the Ops O there for a while. So I have a pretty good body of work at the tactical level and a fair bit at the operational level as well. Worked with SJS, DNOP, that's Strategic Joint Staff. But as only a lieutenant, it's usually a lieutenant commander higher and above, Lieutenant Navy. But for my final couple of years, I need a bit of a break. My ops tempo was really high. I was, it's easy for them to ship out single guys, put us out, go to sea, come back, take a couple months off, and then go right back to sea.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, my last 2 years, I was like, hey, I need a break. My father had almost passed away, and I hadn't seen him in a while. So I said, could you post me to Toronto just to do a 9 to 5 job? So I worked at 4Div, Army setting there for a couple months as the senior watch officer, domestic operations for a little bit. And then eventually I got moved over to recruiting. So like most guys, when they get in recruiting, you sort of learn the process and from the back end, because we've all gone through it. But when you actually get there and learn about the way we do things, it's pretty troubling. And so I'll explain briefly what the process is to get into the Canadian Armed Forces. So you go into a recruiting office, you go to forces.ca or whatever, or you see one of our recruiters at a trade show, or they come to your school and that sort of thing. And so you put in your application, and then you come in and you write CFAT, or the Canadian Forces Aptitude Test, as well as a TSD, which is the Trait Self-Descriptor Test. And those 2 tests make up a portion of your overall score. Okay, so the 3rd and final portion is done through an interview, and that takes place a little ways down the road. So basically what happens is your score is out of 80. Okay, so between those 3 things, you get a score out of 80, and you have to go through a credit check. You have to do you have to be granted your basic security clearance. You have to be deemed medically fit by the medical staff there. And then you get, at the time, it was called the the competition list. So you get put on that competition list, and then whenever they hold a selection board, you would then either get selected or not get selected. So some of the concerning things that I witnessed, well, first of all, everyone there was demoralized because they don't agree with the way the military does things, or the way we do recruiting. You'd have massive budgets for getting females in the military, getting BIPOC in the military, right. And there was like a budget like for nothing else, and you had to do one event for like a EE event every single month and that sort of thing, and they throw tons of money at that stuff, but it wasn't necessarily yielding the results that they were looking for. But anyway, so what happened is they changed the competition list to something called the applicant pool. Okay, so it's no longer competition list, applicant pool. And the way EE works, okay, so there's four versions, or sorry, four different sections for EE. Okay, so it's disabled, uh, indigenous, females, and people of color, or visible minorities. And what it says in the documentation is, all things being equal, you select, the female or anyone from the E category, which makes sense. So what that would mean was that if you have two candidates applying for, let's say, a logistics officer job, and they both score 75, okay, how they would make that selection would be, okay, they would take someone from the E category. But what they've done is they say, okay, well, it's now the applicant pool. The scores don't matter at all, and as long as someone meets the standard or gets into the applicant pool, they can be selected. So we've seen it where we've had people over 70, like their score was 72, and then there was another person who had a score of 48, and because they were a member of EE, they would select that person with the 48 score over the 70 plus score, which goes against what a lot of people believe in the military. You want the best person for the job, regardless of all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the selection board, how it works is they get together in CFRG, or Canadian Forces Recruiting Group headquarters in Borden, and they got all the people around the desk. They bring up a spreadsheet, which is the competition list or the applicant pool, and they have all the different columns. Okay, so you have your score, what trade you're looking for, all of your all the data, the names, that sort of thing. And what they do is they select the filters. Okay, and the first thing they do is they uncheck male from the filters. Okay, so all you have is female. So then they just go down, and it doesn't matter what the score is, they just select all the females. Okay, and then once that's done, they recheck male, and they then uncheck Caucasian, and then they select everyone who's not a Caucasian male.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever jobs are left, they select or they put Caucasian back on it, and then they just select the people for Caucasian. From my understanding, they do then look at the scores for that, but for nothing else. So that is not, in my opinion, not the way to do things. And in all of my fellow military career counselors, everyone at the recruiting center, and we're not just talking like, oh, it's just white males saying that. It's like, no, everyone at the recruiting center, didn't matter their color, didn't matter their gender, that sort of thing. Everyone disagreed with the way they're doing things. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know affirmative action is something that's basically built into our Constitution. But like you said, the way it's always been handled in the past is when all things are considered equal. That's when the affirmative action kicks in. But it seems like we've moved away from a merit-based system, and now they're just selecting on the basis of immutable traits.
Mm-hmm.
In order to give them the optics that they're looking for in this little kabuki theater that we got on the go, where we should have a government. And the military is really just kind of being used as a prop right now, and so are these people. So I think that it does kind of, everyone, I think, should find it gross and a denigration to human dignity to just be selecting people on the basis of the immutable characteristics with which they were born.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there because, I know that there's a perception, at least within my peer group, where we have a lot of people with kids who are going to the recruiting centers these days, and of course, they're white kids and mostly white males who tend to be very interested in service, especially since they've grown up as base brats. And all our kids are being told that they got to get in line, and they don't have the right immutable characteristics to get in the door right away. So they end up on a waiting list for months on end. And of course, they find other jobs and they move on. That's always been an issue with recruiting, but it's just been exacerbated by all of this. So yeah, Drew, I just want to throw that in there because it's really good to hear it from somebody on the inside. A lot of these things that have been going around basically as well-established rumors or open secrets in the military about how our own children are being discriminated against now at the recruiting centers. It's good to put some teeth to that and actually hear that our suspicions are well-founded. So anyway, sorry for the interruption.
But no worries, man. No worries at all. So the other thing with that is people are like, oh, it's all white males. It's a lot of our people, and I don't have the numbers on this, but a lot of our people would come from rural areas based, per capita, I would say it would be the highest percentage. And it has to do, in my opinion, with the fact that there's less job opportunity out there, and the military is a great starting point. You get started right out of high school at $36,000, even grade 10 when you get out, which they can take for certain trades such as infantry. It's $36,000. So it's very competitive in rural areas, right? So there's a lot of job opportunity there. One of the sad things is that what we had to do, myself and some of my fellow military career counselors, is that if there was a good white male applicant that we wanted to get selected, okay, let's just say this guy was a bush pilot and, he scored 76 out of 80 and it was like just a shoe-in, we would actually have to go into their SIFRMS panel and change it to mixed race, and then they would get selected. It was 100%. We wouldn't do it often, but if there was good people who we wanted to get selected, and we knew, like the guys know, the sergeants and warrants and petty officers know, the lieutenant navies, captains, you know when you have a really good candidate who's going to fit within the military culture, and so that's what we would do. Now, one thing that really bothered me is, when someone come in and apply for like logistics officer, public affairs, or that sort of thing, they scored really well. They would say, okay, well, you need to, it's only open for EE. So there's an X amount of positions open for EE. You can't take white males. And they would ask us to lie to them. They say, okay, well, tell the candidate when you come in and do your post sort of CFAT interview is that, hey, these jobs aren't open. And we can put you in another job or whatever. But most of us wouldn't do that. We would come in, we'd sit down with them doing their post CFAT interview and just say, no, say it's not open for white males. Sorry. And that's the truth. And that's what we would do, because these people need to know what the military what the government is forcing the military to do. And me personally, I wasn't going to lie and say, oh no, it's just open. Like, sorry, it's not open for you because you're a white male. So that's the sort of thing that we deal with on a daily basis. And so there's small sort of get-arounds that we have that I just want to quote one thing here, because there's a really good podcaster out there, ex-Navy SEAL, called Andy Stumpf. He does the Cleared Hot podcast, and I was listening to one of his podcasts, and he was telling a story about, he was at a leadership conference or something that he'd been hired to go to. And a woman got up in the crowd and said, asked him a question. He said, well, do you feel that the Navy SEALs are losing out because of sort of lack of diversity, and there's no women in the Navy SEALs because they've tried, but they couldn't make it? And his answer to that was so good that I memorized it, and a lot of our guys and gals at the recruiting center memorized it. And his answer to her was, he goes, well, I don't know. He goes, are we aiming for diversity, or are we aiming to achieve a standard? And that standard is dictated to us by what we're encountering on the battlefield. And the battlefield doesn't give a shit about diversity. And that answer alone, there's no comeback to that. And you ask any sort of hardened tactical or operational level people, they would not disagree with that statement.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the natural order of things too. I mean, we all have to live in reality, and in our natural state, everything is chaos, turmoil, starvation, and basically this whole project of civilization is something like the emancipation of the human race from nature. You know, we live in a relatively affluent society. I mean, some of the most affluent that's ever existed, that's insulated us from the hardships that nature would otherwise inflict. And so we sort of lost touch with the fact that we are still subordinate to this reality. I mean, and we have to live within it. It still exists elsewhere, and on the battlefield, like you said, that is the common standard that we have to rise to. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we have leadership out there that's willing to push back on this kind of thing now, because yeah, I mean, I am sickened, I would say, by the number of Ukrainian flags I see flying around my hometown, for example, because I won't even advocate. I would never advocate for sending our young people to any war at this point in time. I think it's socially abusive. I think that we're exploiting them, and we haven't done our jobs to make sure that they're as safe as they can be when we deploy them into those dangerous environments. Not with equipment, not with training, and not with the selection of personnel. So yeah, I think that we're basically exploiting young people right now and putting them at undue levels of hardship and harm as a result of the mismanagement of the policy. But
well, yeah, definitely, because that's what it affects operational capability, right, down the road, is when you're not putting the best forward person for the job. And I have a lot of experience. I've run boarding teams. I've run NTOG teams. And the thing is I've had females on my team. I've had black guys on my team. I've had Arab guys on my team. Our interpreter, who's part of our team for my 2012, 2013. It doesn't matter. It's like, can you do the job? And there was never this sort of divisive stuff on our teams. And now people can say, oh, well, there's racism, and that there is. Just like in any part of the of our society, there's going to be a level of that stuff. But when you're a high readiness deployed team, I've never seen anything of that, like anything of that nature on those teams. It's like, okay, we're together, let's get over there, let's take the ship, let's do our thing, let's have each other's back. And this is what I always say when I push back to the CO or the deck commander, is like, I go, you guys need to tell them, I understand, their policies that they're forcing on us, but we're not a passport office. I'd say it all the time. I go, we're not a passport office. We are we have legalized monopoly on violence. They can send us overseas to do bad things to bad people. Like, this should not even factor in to that sort of thing. And I'll just give one more story from a black who is a black let's see, what do you got, corporal or leading seaman or killick, we call in the Navy. And when they came in with this sort of black policy, and there has to be a separate chain of command for black people, and all this is a whole nother thing, which we'll have another story on once I pass my my 1 year since I released, so I can release some of the documentation, some of the emails that I have, where we can talk about the story specifically. But this guy came in and he talked to me. He's like, Liz, I'm quitting. He goes, I'm VRing because he goes, I came to the military to get away from this political correct nonsense and being treated differently because I'm a black guy. And he said, what did he say? He goes, I'll be discriminated against by my element. So that means Army, Navy, or Air Force. He goes, by my trade. And he said, by my rank. And that's what I expect to be discriminated against. And a lot of it's just, friendly banter back and forth. But he quit. He came out, was like, what are we doing? Like, this is just nonsense that I don't want to be a part of. And I remember one of our sergeants, who was, again, a black guy, long time in, over 20 years in. And when they were talking about, we will have this separate area where, the black people, the black members can go in case they feel triggered or whatever. And he got up and he just said this. He goes, listen, he goes, the black safe space for you all is at my desk, so I can slap you upside your head. I think he said, like, he's just like, we're not doing this. He said, we're not doing that. We're not creating the sort of divisive policy and rhetoric going to be forced down onto us.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of pushback from that stuff. But again, I won't get too much into that. That's a whole nother story, which we'll talk about in September, because there's a bunch of there's some interesting emails I had with very, very, very senior leadership within the CAF that I was pushing back against.
Yeah, and I could. I'm just trying to put myself in that black guy's shoes. I mean, how infantilizing it must be, to be talked about as if you needed special care from all the white people because you're black. Like that's. I just don't know how more people aren't sickened by that. So I just want to give a quick shout out here, Drew. Sorry. But I had somebody chime in here. He says, "What's up, Jeff?" That's Tad Baines. He's an old training partner of mine that I used to do martial arts with down in Florida. So he's one of my favorite rednecks. And anyway, I just thought that was really neat. How you doing, Tad, down in Florida? Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. Well, I'll give a shout out to Thomas Griffiths. Him and I were chatting as well on Facebook over a couple of things. I think he's an Army guy. So, yeah. But I won't hold that against you there, Thomas. Another thing, I'll touch on sort of one more story on that is I have a really good friend who's very senior at within the Navy, and sailed with her and spent a lot of time with her. She was my boss for a portion of my career. Awesome woman, strong leader. Just amazing. And I would literally follow her into war. That's the type of leader and type of naval officer she is. And her and I were having a private conversation. I was in Toronto and she was doing her staff college. And so we got together and just talk. And she is against this being treated differently because she's a female. And the reason being, and she summed up perfectly, she's like, okay, well, I'm going to take command of a ship. And she goes, because of they're forcing all this stuff on there, is that her sailors and the people who are with her are going to look at her and say, oh, I'm not going to respect her because she's probably in this position because she's a female. Not from all the deployment time she's done, not the fact that she's dedicated her life to the Navy and she is just an excellent leader, excellent woman. All that's being thrown in the back seat because she's like, well, people are just going to look at me and say, oh, I'm the CO because I'm a female. It's an EE thing. And so she was upset about that. And I forgot one other thing about the actual recruiting process. There's a lot of the time, like you can select on your application whether you want to be considered for EE, right? A lot of people would come in and not have that selected. So they were young women or young, because in Toronto, so it's fairly diverse. You get a lot of Asian, you get a lot of Black, you get a lot of Indian applicants. And a lot of them would have that unchecked. And I remember I was talking to one young girl. She was applying for RMC, like our ROTP, regular officer training plan for subsidized education. And she could have checked that. And she actually talked to me and said, just make sure that you guys select me based on the fact of, based on my skills, my leadership, my experience, my school marks, and that sort of thing, and not the fact that I'm a woman. So she didn't have that box checked. And then she, on top of that, she made sure that we didn't have it. Now, going back to the selection boards, they don't care. They just ignore that, right? So they don't care. They'll just take you because you're a female. And so they're going against the wishes of these people who are selecting that they don't want that, to be considered when they're being selected by the board.
Yeah, I think that strong people want to be judged on their merit, not on their immutable characteristics. It's just really gross. I was going to throw to a quick comment here. This looks like a response to somebody, and I'm not sure, but I'll just go. It says, "Duke, were you listening?" But this was a comment related to what was being said, and I don't agree with you. Anyway, I'm a nationalist, and I'm sick of seeing the boomers give away our country. So I thought that was pretty neat because I'm always trashing the boomers. So I like to see that it's catching on. I just thought I'd throw that up there.
Yeah.
But
I got so the Well, do you want to bring up the article?
Sure thing. Yeah, we'll go to the article.
Or whichever one. I don't know if it's the change of command or
it's this one, the frigates.
Are you hitting F11 there? Oh, beauty.
There it goes. Okay. I'm still learning, guys. So yeah, I mean, this was you put this up in the general chats there a little while ago.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and read from it here so everybody knows what we're talking about, and then we'll dive into a discussion. Let's see. It says Canadian frigates absent from NATO naval forces for the first time since 2014. Ottawa. For the first time in 8 years, Canadian warships are not involved in either of two NATO naval task forces charged with patrolling European waters and defending against Russian threats. The revelation has cast a spotlight on what experts say are the growing trade-offs that Canada is having to make with its Navy, which is struggling with the shrinking fleet of aging ships and a lack of trained soldiers. Canada has been a consistent presence in the standing NATO maritime group since Russia's annexation of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in 2014, deploying at least one Halifax-class frigate to the North Atlantic or Mediterranean on a rotational basis. The federal Liberal government has made it a point of deploying the second frigate in March as part of its response to Russia's invasion in the Ukraine. That ship has been planned for a months-long deployment in the Indian Ocean and Middle East. But Defense Department spokeswoman Jessica Lemired says Canada does not have any frigates attached to either the NATO groups since HMCS Montreal and HMCS Halifax returned to their home port last month. Quote, with the return home of HMCS Montreal and Halifax on July 15th, the CAF does not currently have a ship tasked to either standing NATO Maritime Group 1 or 2, Lemirian said in an email. Quote, this is the first time this has occurred since 2014, close quote. Lemirian linked the decision not to send any new frigates to Europe to the deployment of two such vessels to the Asia-Pacific region, as well as the Halifax-class fleet's maintenance and training requirements. Canada has instead deployed two similar Kingston-class coastal defense vessels to work within different NATO forces that has focused on finding and clearing enemy mines. Chief of the Defense Staff, General Wayne Eyre, said that we'll keep Canadian sailors gaining experience in an important area of naval warfare while still showing Canada's commitment to Europe's security. But he conceded in an interview with the Canadian Press on Monday, quote, we are stretched from a resource perspective. And so we've got to make those decisions where we invest and where we invest and when we invest, close quote. He added that he approved the decision to send two frigates to the Pacific where tensions between the West and China are growing, quote, because we want to deliberately increase our presence in Asia Pacific because we are a Pacific nation, close quote. China last week launched a massive military exercise around Taiwan, the self-ruled island that Beijing considers its territory, after U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited Taipei. The exercise came amid growing fears of potential Chinese invasion. University of Calgary shipbuilding expert Timothy Choi said the decision to send two frigates to Europe at the same time earlier this year played a large role in constraining Atlantic Fleet's ability to send another frigate in the short term. Quote, to my mind, it doesn't mean that the availability of ships and crews have deteriorated over the last few years, close quote, he said. Quote, it's the unavoidable consequences of forcing a small fleet to concentrate more resources into a smaller time frame, which results in more time required to recuperate, close quote. But defense analyst David Perry of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute predicted Canada will have to make increasingly difficult trade-offs in where to send its warships given the size and state of its Navy. While Canada has 12 frigates, Perry said that the Navy's maintenance and training requirements mean only a handful are available to deploy at any given time. Canada used to also have 3 destroyers, but those vessels were retired in 2014. Adding to the difficulty of the growing age of the frigates, which entered service in the 1990s and are becoming increasingly more challenging to fix and maintain, according to both senior officers and internal reports. Quote, those decisions about trade-offs are going to become increasingly difficult because, and we're already experiencing this, the maintenance cycle on a ship that old is becoming more intense and more labor-intensive and longer, close quote, Perry said. Adam MacDonald, a former naval officer now studying at Dalhousie University in Halifax, said the Navy and the Canadian Armed Forces are also expected to face growing pressures to maintain a presence in Europe, Asia, and the Arctic. Quote, it's going to be very pressing because there's going to be demands on all three of those geographic environments, MacDonald said. On top of anywhere else we operate, the Caribbean, West Africa, South Africa. The federal government is overseeing construction of a new fleet of warships to replace the frigates and destroyers, but the multi-billion-dollar project has been plagued by cost overruns and repeated delays. The Navy, like the rest of the military, is also facing severe shortage of personnel. In the meantime, MacDonald predicted the Kingston-class minesweepers will continue to pick up more slack as the Navy increases demands overseas. Yeah, so stretched pretty thin, I think, is probably not even the word. And we seem to be sending the wrong kinds of ships to fight a war with China. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, so I know, shout out to Adam MacDonald. I know him fairly well, did a 6-month-long course with him. Good guy, very smart guy. And what it all boils down to. So actually, let me just backtrack. So the Halifax class frigates, like multi-purpose or multi-role frigates, are actually excellent ships, right? Excellent ships when they're working. They have dive team capability, boarding capability, helos. They are overall great ships, and I've spent the majority of my career on those ships. The problem is that it all boils down to personnel. So when I was in recruiting, the majority of the red or priority trades or threshold or yellow trades, that's what that means is they need people as soon as possible, are Navy trades, because it is a tough job being at sea, being away from home all the time. And it's not like the Army where, when it takes a while, they know a big mission's coming, they pack up, it's months or years ahead and they go and deploy. The Navy, just if you're the ready duty ship, you can just pick up and go and be gone for a month at a time within 24 hours if you're doing like a humanitarian or disaster response type thing. So it boils down to personnel. And the problem is that there's a lot of people in the Navy who are unfit sea. I can't remember what the percentage was. I think it was like 30 or 40%. And being at sea is tough, right? Because you're rolling. It's hard on your knees. I would say that myself included, maybe fitness wasn't the priority for the Navy. So I would say a lot of our officers and petty officers were like, we have crappy gyms on the ship. It's really hard to work out. We're entitled to our duff, or that's dessert. And when you're carrying a bunch of extra weight, and you have all sorts of guys with knee problems, we had guys who couldn't fit through the emergency escape hatches, and so fitness wasn't a big part. I think the fitness for the CAF is maybe not up to par. Like when I was down working with the Americans, oh my God, those people did like forced PT every day, and they were much fitter than us. Yeah. And let me just tell one story though. We were doing an emergency a medevac for one of our sailors when we were coming back from a deployment, and we actually stopped at Wake Island, and there was one of our guys who was I won't say what rank he is, but anyways, he was like climbing up the jumping ladder, the side of the ship there, with like a Army major in the United States. He was sort of coming on board, and our guy barely made it up the ladder, and he did like this Chris Farley barrel roll onto the deck, and and I was sitting there because I was the deck officer, and our CO, who is Jason Boyd at the time, great CO. He's a fit guy. He was shaking the hand of this Army major who was ultra fit. And there was like our sort of big overweight naval officer, like lying on the non-skid beside, because he almost didn't make it up the ladder. So when it comes to that stuff, so anyways, there's a lot of people who are unfit sea in the Navy. And then what happens is you basically do a crew swap, or what they call jetty, I forget the term, but basically you go and deploy, you'd come back, and then another ship has to get out the door, and you would just jetty hop over to the other ship and go. And so when you're sending the same sailors, the same people to C to sort of make up for the lack of personnel, the people who are unfit C, then they're going to get sick. They're going to get hurt. They're going to have, mental health issues because they're away from home all the time, away from their kids, that sort of thing. And so it's just a snowballing effect.
Yeah, this kind of has been a problem as long as I've been in the military. I can remember coming in 2001, and those guys were not fit. I was fitter than probably just about everybody at my first unit. Back then, that was when they really started saying things like, if you're not deployable, you're not employable. That was kind of just coming around. It was really something to see, okay, guys, we're going for a run. And you get, oh, my back, and oh, my knee. And the warrant's like, you guys got a chit for that? And they're like, oh, well, I didn't think I needed a chit. And all right, well, then go to the hospital. I was only young, and I was kind of looking around like, Jesus, how did things ever get this way? But you read articles over the years where other people who've gone to war that are my age, and they're having problems and they're getting released and things like this. And I see these comments here and there, like there are all these people with no medals on their chest still walking around NDHQ. Waddling, I think, would be probably more accurate. But so the people who really don't get into it for service reasons, they're all about my pension, my paycheck, my promotion, and they don't go anywhere, and they're all still there, kind of running things. And the people who are in it for the service reasons, they just get burnt out. They get all chewed up, and once they're all used up, they get discarded. And so we have this situation where it's kind of like the people who were just sort of exploiting the institution for what it can do for them and set them up with that nice pension. They're all kind of still there. They get to serve their full careers, where those of us who joined interested in service and volunteered to go to war, we're all broken and discarded now. The same old shenanigans that really drove us into this situation in the first place are really getting worse than ever, I think, at the highest level. So, I think the situation is quite dire.
It just ties it, like, it's not a culture of fitness, I don't think, within the Canadian forces as a whole. And you compare us to the Australians.
Yep.
When we were in Dubai or Jebel Ali for one of our deployments, and we went outboard of we came alongside an Australian ship. I think it was the HMAS Anzac at the time. That ship, I've never seen so many fit people. They actually took their gym and put it on the jetty, and those people just worked out all day. They were all fit, and and I'm not trying to attack people who are unfit, but it has to do with the culture. So, they're always like, oh, we have to change culture within the CAF. Yeah,
it's leadership.
Yeah, exactly. Let's change it to a culture of fitness. And even when we went from the express test down to the force test, to me, that was a step back, right? You had to do the push-ups, you had to do the sit-ups, and it was actually a competition. We did that beep run. I think my highest I got was like 11.5 or 12 or something like that. And I was competing against other fit guys and gals who were just like, we keep going until you won, or you had lost because you didn't cross the line in time. So there's some camaraderie there. But yeah, leadership, fitness. And I know a couple of years back they said, okay, well, you have to eat healthier and that sort of thing. You know what? My CO, I think it was Clive Butler on HMCS Vancouver when we deployed. That guy was a beauty. He was a clearance. He was a diver, clearance diver. He actually passed the JTF2 selection, but he just never got picked up for the course. Anyways, awesome guy, fit guy. He had to approve the menu from the chief cook. And he would be like, no fried food, no fries, none of this crappy food. And it was all sort of healthy options on Vancouver. And, that's the sort of thing you need, is like, hey, and people would be complaining, oh, I'm entitled to my duff and my dessert. And he's like, okay, well, you can have a piece of fruit instead of like this giant, cinnamon bun type thing. So
I knew guys who ate cake at every meal. It was ridiculous. Like, yeah, you go on course and you got access to all that duff. They'd have a sticky bun in the morning, a piece of pie at lunch, a piece of cake at supper time, and I'm looking at them taking pills, because they got the type 2 diabetes and all this stuff, and it's like, man, you ever think, maybe you don't need this medication? Maybe you just stop eating cake at every meal, and maybe you wouldn't have type 2 diabetes. Hey, hit the gym once in a while too, guys.
But it just goes back with the Navy, with the culture, and just the lack of personnel. Like, and there some of them are crappy jobs, man. Like sonar op, it's not a good job. It's not rewarding. They try and make it better with spec pay and that sort of thing. But it's not. You're sitting in a dark operations room for 12 hours every single day. You do 8 on, 8 off, 4 on, 4 off. And you're just looking at screens and talking and playing cards and that sort of thing. But one interesting thing from the article, and this what they mentioned is, and I assume this is the same with the Air Force and the armies, but for you to maintain one high readiness ship, one high readiness sailor, whatever it is, you either need 3 or 4 so that you can cycle through extended readiness, low, standard, and then high readiness. And so what they did when they did have 2 high readiness ships deployed, that sort of created a something in the fleet schedule where it's like, okay, well, we can't force generate another ship in time or a crew to get out there and replace them. But with 12 ships, you should be able to have at a minimum 2 high readiness ships, 1 per coast, so 1 in the Pacific, 1 in Europe or the Med at all times. But I think it just ties back to the lack of sailors and the lack of fit sailors. And again, it goes back to recruiting. Is, do people really want to join the military anymore? Do people want to join the woke military? And when I got out and they said, oh, what can we do to make you to stay? We can retain you for 3 years. You're a pretty experienced guy, a military career counselor. And, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. And I told them, I said, hey, you know what? I can no longer in good conscience recruit young Canadian men and women into this woke military. So there's nothing you can do to keep me unless you change the policies. So
I talked my own son out of joining the military.
Yeah, even my friends, right? Like I got a good friend of mine, Manny, who was getting in, and he was going to go for signals, become a signals officer or whatever you guys call them. And he's one of my best buddies, a black guy, grew up in Scarborough, awesome. He has a great family. It would be he's like 6'6", like 240 pounds of muscle. And I said, buddy, like it's not the place. It's not what it was when I joined. And I talked, and he had done the interview and everything. And I talked him out of it because I was like, it's not what you think it is, man. You're going to get in there and it's just going to be a bunch of this woke nonsense being pushed on you. And he is anti-woke as can be. Yeah. And so it's just, and we're going to continue to have these recruiting issues until there's a change in leadership or some of our senior leadership start to push back against the federal government, say, hey, this isn't working for us.
Yeah, that's right. And it seems to me that like highly fit, highly intelligent, high readiness type people, they don't want to work with this military, right? Because it's not about merit anymore. But I'll throw this up. I thought this was interesting to hear from somebody here. She says, Marianne says, as an Aboriginal woman that served in the CAF in the 1980s, while in Cornwallis, trainers were verbally abusive / racist, realized it was part of the training. Had to have a thick skin. Learned lots. I hear that too. I hear that from some of the folks that went through before I came in and stuff. And a lot of them say, yeah, like that's the point of basic training. It's, you're supposed to learn the coping skills that you need to deal with the kind of high stress situations you're going to encounter overseas. And I always ask, like, you think we're hard on you. What what do you think the enemy is going to be like, right? So that's kind of the
Well,
purpose.
and one thing, like this is what people went through in the 70s and the 80s. Like we have Veterans for Freedom members who were like 80 years old,
Yeah.
and they talk about when they get through. And and I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist today, but back then it was probably more common because of that was just the way society was, right? Those racial barriers hadn't been broken down, and there was just it was just part of a societal thing.
I kind of wonder, I'm always questioning everything, and I kind of wonder if maybe the people that might have been the trainers that might have been hitting them with ethnic slurs and stuff like that, if they were genuinely racist, or if they were just kind of needling them to give them something to have to cope with, because that was always the name of the game, whether they're doing your stand by the bed inspection or whatever it is. When they start jacking you and they see your shoulders go down, like you're like it's really impacting you, then they'll just stay on you, because if you can't learn to let that stuff roll off, then how are you going to cope in a battlefield? But I think I'll throw to the next article here, Drew. So
so go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. You want to introduce this, man? You threw this to me.
Yeah, so this ties back into recruiting, and what it was this happened before I got there, before I was posted in, but I actually got back briefed on this. And so what happened is the colonel, I think it was on the right, you can look at the rack of medals that this guy has.
Yep, nice.
He was, very experienced and, very strong leader and that sort of thing. Why he was put in the role as a commander CFRG, I'm not, the Canadian Forces Recruiting Group, not too sure. But anyways, he was a guy who was pushing back against the leadership and DMIL, whatever, Director of Military Personnel, DMP or whatever. And he was pushing back and saying, no, SIP first, which is our strategic intake plan. So we're going to fill it with all the best people, and then we'll consider your EE stuff later on. Right. And so he was pushing back, and he was basically, from my understanding, what I was told was he was pushing down to the commanders, like, no, SIP first. Let's take the best people. We need to get the best people in the military. And he was actively fighting back against the EE stuff, which was always around, but it didn't take, according to people who've been in the unit longer, it really didn't take. They were just sort of acknowledging it, but not enforcing it. And until about, I think, 2016 is when it really started to come down, and then people were getting hammered and be like, oh, you got to do it. It's all you get those numbers up. And so this guy got replaced by Air Force engineer on the left, who, I've met and I worked for, and, he was a nice enough guy, but wasn't someone who's going to push back. You can see his medal compared to the other guy's medals. He wasn't going to push back and say, oh no, it's, it's for, we have to worry about the operational effectiveness of the CAF and, force generation and that sort of thing. He was just going to be more of like a yes man and be like, okay, whatever you say, yeah, we'll do it. We'll enforce these policies that are affecting the military. So you can just see, and this guy, from my understanding, like I said, I wasn't there, but he got pushed out because he was not adopting the practices that were being forced on them. And on top of that, is people say, okay, well, so the government comes down and says, okay, you need 25% women, 15% Vismin, and 3% Indigenous. And it's something that they'll never achieve. And the reason being is, I think 25% of the SIP or the Canadian Armed Forces is made up of the 4 combat arms trades. Okay, so armored, infantry, combat engineers, and artillery. Generally, women do not want to do those jobs. Okay, men don't want to do those jobs. Those are tough jobs, and I'm not saying they can't do it, but it is a tough go. And we rarely would have young women or women come in and say, yeah, I want to be infantry, I want to be artillery. It was almost it was more support roles, healthcare administrator, logistics officer, and admins, principal of war. Those are much needed positions. But human resources administrator, financial services, those were the jobs that females would go to. And I watched some of the where some of the some of our leadership were being grilled by the Senate saying, oh yeah, you're not getting people into the military, your numbers have been stagnant, blah, blah, blah. And they just be hammering the senior leadership. And all it took was one of them to say, listen, okay, you want to get 25% female in the CAF, you want to get 50% female in the CAF, you just have to say, okay, well, we're going to have our strategic intake plan, SIP or strategic intake plan, which is 6,000. We'll just put half of those, let's put them logistics officers and financial services and human resources administrator and healthcare administrator, all those support roles, med tech. Just change all the SIP, and then we'll have a ton of women in the military. It won't be functioning, but we'll reach those numbers, because that's what it is. Like, women do not generally want to do infantry and those combat armed trades. They want to do the support trades, logistics, and that sort of thing. So if they just change the SIP and say, okay, let's just take 6,000 logistics officers, FSA, HRA, let's take all those support trades. They're going to get tons of women, because we would get women coming in and applying, but it was for those support roles. It wasn't for the combat arms trades and some of the operator trades.
Yeah, this is kind of an issue that I've been tracking for quite a while. Men and women are different. And I can remember reading some stuff back in the day from a guy named Dr. Warren Farrell. He's written a lot of good books on this subject. He was actually the president of the National Organization for Women in the late 70s there. So right peak third wave feminism. He gets elected to be the National Organization for Women's president. And then what he says happened is it was the pay gap statistic that made him think twice. And he was like, well, wait a minute, if it's true that you can get away with paying a woman 78 cents on the dollar what you can a man, where are all of these companies that only hire women in order to save themselves 22% on their payroll, right? Like, who wouldn't do that? We're capitalists. Of course we would do that. So he started taking a harder look at it, and he found, well, he's written several books, but one thing that's very different about men is the kinds of jobs that we pursue. And the thing about us is that, we look for different traits in our mates. So men are typically attracted to youth and beauty, and that's biological, right? These are the markers of fertility that we're looking for. We're looking for like hourglass figure, good facial symmetry, and all of the attributes that would indicate that this is somebody who's going to produce successful offspring. We're animals, so that's just what it is. And on the other side of things, women tend to select for men, who for their resource provisioning ability, because human females are completely encumbered with newborns in the ancestral environment, in the wild. They have to breastfeed and they have to coddle. We're completely helpless. We're basically marsupials with no pouches when we're born, whereas something like a horse is basically trotting around within a few minutes. So women are completely encumbered for years with newborns, and they need men that are going to stick around and take risks and provide resources for them. And so they tend to select for guys who are a little higher in the hierarchy and who make money, and so men will select for basically higher pay no matter what, and they will select for things occupations that involve a lot of risk taking and stuff like that, because basically that's what girls go for. They go for nice cars, they go for high status guys, they go for strong men. Men are 3 times as strong as women because women selected for that. They need men who can dominate other men when push comes to shove in the ancestral environment, of course, is what I'm speaking of. And so, we see some very big differences in the way that men and women pursue jobs. And I think that we're better served by just sort of embracing these truths than coming up with these fantastical ideas about, non-existent genders and the like. But I wanted to go back to something you were just saying, just for the civvies here. Anybody who's not really familiar with military service, when we're saying like you can just see what's happening here, where you've got this guy over here on the right with this nice big rack of medals here. It's hard to see how many. It might be 7 or 8. They start to overlap at about 6, and that. So he's done a lot of. He's got a lot of operational experience. I mean, I was in for 20 years. I did 2 deployments. This guy's got like 7, I think. And over here, the guy who's taken over in the blue Air Force uniform. Now, first of all, I'm Air Force, so I can acknowledge that we do have that kind of reputation as being the squishiest of the 3 of the three elements. And really, I think that's more about air crew than Air Force. I was in the support trade and I slept in the same damn tents as the Army when I was overseas. So, so there's a difference there. But he's got this medal here, which is the CD. This is the haircut medal that everybody gets for what we call 12 years of undetected crime. And then you get a clasp on there at 22 years. And then you get another clasp at like 32 years. I don't even know. So this guy's got like his CD4. And what that says to me is he's just been hanging around ADHQ, office environment, air conditioned stuff, 5-star hotels. And he never went overseas. And here you can see on his pocket, he's got like several commendations here. You're not able to make out what they are from this distance, obviously. But, you know, these are the kind of stories that you hear about the CDS coming to like an infantry battalion to give somebody. And I literally heard this story on my intermediate leadership program from another warrant officer where, you know, one of his guys saved a ton of people from a burning train that had derailed. Like he literally firemen's carried a bunch of people away from a derailed train, and he gets the CDS comes to town to give him a commendation, and while he's giving him his commendation for, you know, valor and bravery, at the same time he gives out another CDS commendation to some colonel who, you know, streamlined some administrative process. Yeah. So that's what's going on here. You've got this company man who knows how to keep his bosses happy over here, who never went anywhere, and really, I mean, it's a question of character development. I think the hardship and the sacrifice when you're going over there on seas, and he never availed himself of those opportunities, or, you know, maybe it just didn't work. I don't know. But at any rate, he's probably not connected with a lot of the realities that we face overseas, and therefore probably not very well positioned to be selecting for people that we're going to send overseas. I think you're needlessly putting people in harm's way at an elevated risk of harm when you do that. But anyway, I just wanted to clarify that for everybody when we're looking at this picture. Those are the things that we're looking at. And I think I'll just forego the article here. It's pretty short. And
it's not. It was more just for the picture, and just to touch what got me to join the CAF back in 2009 was that series of TV commercials where it was like fight chaos, fight fear, fight whatever, fight with the Canadian Armed Forces. Like that's literally, I watched those over and over when I was watching TV, and I was like, yeah, this is for me. This is what I want to do. I don't want to work for a corporation where it's all about the money. And being a big, you know, sports player growing up in Toronto, you know, I just wanted that team environment. So that's what got me in, and it just sort of jogged my memory. And I remember one female who I was working with at the recruiting center, and she would laugh because she was like, oh, look at all the stuff they're doing. She's like, they're showing for the recruiting, they're, you know, 50% of all of our ads are showing you know, women doing jobs and roles, working on planes and ships and that sort of thing. In her opinion, not mine, her opinion was that, she goes, if you want to get women to join the military, she goes, if you show fit men in uniform, she goes, that will do a better job in getting women to join than having showing a bunch of other sort of females doing jobs. That was according to her. Like I said, that's what she told me, and I thought that was interesting.
Well, I mean, it's one of those truths, I think, that is a little bit uncomfortable to speak out loud. But yeah, there are women who join looking for a career man who's fit. And, you know, there's no shortage of that in the military. So that does happen. And I'm not saying that that's common, but yeah, I mean, you do see a little bit of that around there. We're people. It's life. And yeah, you're talking about. I kind of said, you know, if I always said, like, just based on my understanding of Dr. Warren Farrell and what he says about the ways that men and women select for jobs and mates, I can't help but think that, because I've known a lot of women in my career too, and I've had girlfriends in the military and stuff like that, and I've said, just based on some of my experience there, that you know, if you really want to get women into the ranks, the thing you should do is show them that they can be a reservist, stay in their hometown, work administrative jobs, that they have benefits for families and stuff like that, air-conditioned work environments, and free boob jobs if you have low self-esteem. So, because that's a thing too, if you didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, like I said, I've met all sorts of different people in my career, and people ask me about my time in the military. I was like, listen, I've met some of the best people I've ever met in my life, and I've met some of the worst people. And but regardless of people's gender or skin color or religion, whatever, like none of that in my experience, and now it might be a little bit different for me because I did grow up in Scarborough, where it's very multicultural. You look at my group of media friends, white people are in the minority, and there's all sorts of different religions and cultures here. So maybe it's more custom to me than someone who might be coming from a rural area who's not used to that. But all these people that I've worked with, I've never looked through the lens, like the woke / politically correct / or like that lens in my military career. Like I never look at it and say, oh, this guy, because he's Italian, he's this way, because he's black this way, because I've never done that in my career. It's like, can you do the job?
Exactly.
Are you working hard? Do you believe in the mission? That's all that matters. And I get ask people like, well, you're out of the military, why do you care about this stuff now? It's like, hey, I'm going to get older, and Canada needs a strong military to look after our country when we're older and we are unable to do it. And Canada is not a militaristic nation, but and so we don't see too much or talk about too much about what the military does. It's not in the news like the United States where they talk about everything all the time. Is that our military actually does a lot of stuff domestically and internationally. So every JTF, so there's Joint Task Force, like either Pacific or Central or East, or 6 of them across that are led by an admiral or a general. Each of those JTFs has an IRU, which is Immediate Response Unit, of 250 troops or sailors or airmen ready to go within 24 hours. And it's basically it's a giant workforce that the government or that the military can use. And when I was DOMA, or domestic operations, and the senior watch officer for 4DIV, which is Joint Task Force Central, it was great because you needed people to go and help fight fires and floods. And I remember down in, there was big ice chunks that were destroying bridges. They sent down Army engineers. Like there's all sorts of stuff that the Canadian Armed Forces does behind the scene domestically. And us as a country, we need a strong and capable military to be able to handle those sorts of things. And like I said, it's not talked about in the news, but they stood up when they were having, in 2015, or 2016, when Donald Trump got elected in the United States, there was a mass migration of, I think, Haitian immigrants through Cornwall, I believe it was. And I read the after action report on that. And they basically surged. They got the RU, went down, they set up tents at the border, and the military was processing this massive surge of immigrants across the border. Right. But if you don't have that workforce of people can get up and work together and speak the same language, it's going to be detrimental to our country when we do have forest fires, or like the fires that were out, I think it was in Manitoba, Alberta. They sent the IRUs there. They sent a big Navy contingent there who were driving small boats. Oh, sorry, that was for the floods. Sorry, my bad. The floods, I think, was in Manitoba, not forest fires. They sent a big contingent of Navy from the West Coast to operate and get people and rescue and that sort of thing. So we actually need those people to be able to do those tasks when required.
Yeah, and I think it's more than just the disaster relief. Like that's part of our mandate too, but we also have things like air defense in there. And I heard you say that Canada is not a militaristic nation, but I would say, it kind of is. It's just that we're trying real hard not to be. And that's all coming from the leadership, and everything went downhill with since Vietnam. That's kind of my position. And I had somebody throw this in there. It says, how did the boomers trash the country? Well, and, I mean, I'll say broadly that they're the only generation to soak up wealth from all the other generations. And they've been doing that. This is a social trend that I've been following for a while, where they've been playing games with the housing market and running up the prices and selling Gen X their 30-year-old fixer-uppers so they can move into gated communities. And really, they're the only generation that's ever done that. I mean, they had generations coming up ahead of them that invested in them and provided them with an affordable middle class, low-interest student loans, low rates of tuition, and all that stuff. And now that they're the lenders and they're the owners, they didn't pay it forward. These are really broad strokes that I'm using right now, but I'd be happy to do a deep dive in another video on that stuff. As far as the military goes, since that's what we're talking about today, we have a generation. I mean, I had to come up behind a generation of leadership, the boomer generation of leadership, that didn't go to war when it was their turn. They chickened out of Vietnam, and we chickened out as a country. They dodged down in the United States, and we ended up being like this bastion for the Dodgers. And, it was a perfectly justified war. It had all the same legal and moral justifications as the Korean War. But we didn't go, and so I had to come up behind a generation that didn't go to war when it was their turn, and really didn't get it. When it was time to send the rest of us. And I can't help but think, I did think while I was in Afghanistan that I was going to way too many ramp ceremonies, and I just knew that it was because of the kind of hubristic and ignorant leadership that I'd become accustomed to while I was there. My general got fired from Afghanistan for carrying on an open affair with his civilian administrative assistant, and he negligently discharged his own weapon twice, once even in front of the chief of defense staff. So that's kind of the kind of leadership that I've had to come up behind. It's been pretty terrible. They seem to think it's all about fun in the sun, and they don't take the military very seriously, and they're the ones running it right now. So that really explains a lot with what we're seeing. I think that a lot of the cultural issues that we're seeing, like the issue around fitness for service, that was an issue when I first came in 2001, and it was that generation, and they're the generation, like we saw in that previous photo, that has that CD4 or whatever it is. They've been around forever and they never deploy anywhere. So they're the ones running things right now, and that's kind of what I see across the board with all the institutions, whether it's Brenda Lucky and the RCMP, or General Iyer in the military, or deans of the universities, the editorial boards of the state-funded press. It's kind of across the board, I think, where we have a bunch of draft dodgers running our institutions, and they're kind of out of touch with reality. But I digress.
Yeah, there's just a rant on the boomers and that sort of thing. I won't comment too much on that because I'm not as well versed and as opinionated as Jeff on that stuff. But so one thing, just so people are aware, the reason you talk about sort of deployments and why that matters when you make is because when you talk about joint operations, that's between Air Force, Army, and Navy. And then when you talk about combined, that's from different countries, right? So like I've been combined Task Force 150, which is a bunch of different nations working together. Is that when you get that sort of breadth of experience and that body of work in working in different elements and with different countries and different areas of warfare, when you move up the chain, you're more informed and well-versed to making decisions that impact the country as a whole. So if I just, my career, I did some joint, bunch of combined operations, and I've worked with, the Americans a fair bit. But if I just, most of my stuff is just Navy, and I was just Navy all the time. And then I moved up in the chain, and you do your staff college and that sort of thing. And then you start making decisions that are going to affect the Army and the Air Force, and you actually don't have any experience in those working within or with those elements, then you're just making decisions from not making decisions from an area of expertise, which is why when you have sort of leaders moving up and, chief petty officers, chief warrant, you want them to have more medals, because that means they're out in the field, they understand warfare, and they're not just necessarily people sitting at home who don't have that experience.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll say as well, like I've even had the experience of, having to do suicide watch for a guy who was in cells because he went AWOL from, he was in Newfoundland. I was in Gander at the time, and he went AWOL from Petawawa. This guy had 5 years in the military, and they sent him on 3 tours in Afghanistan. And then he just burnt out. They broke him. And since he was AWOL, the MPs had to go pick him up and put him in cells to send him back to. Yeah, I know, right? It's just awful. I'm going in there, and they're like, "Yeah, don't talk to him. Yeah, don't say anything." Come on, guys. We're going to talk about MMA.
It's funny. This one guy goes, I just want to comment on comment. He goes, "Oh, thank God I didn't take V4F. They don't take it seriously." Anyways, he goes, he's talking about Freemason, that sort of thing. I don't think people understand, and it's not just us, it's a bunch of other organizations, how much information gets sent our way. It is incredible. We have hundreds and hundreds of emails in our info box. People are like, "Oh, hey, look, you got to review the Pfizer documents. Oh, there's this thing like that you guys need to get in and overthrow this person down in South Africa because they're doing this." It's like unbelievable how much information is. We only have a finite amount of resources. Okay, we're all volunteers. We all have lives and families and that sort of thing. So when people send us stuff and like, "Oh, look, I went to return my gear on my clothing docks and they made me pay for this my white toque. And when I was in Maple Resolve or whatever it is, I lost it in private. So-and-so stole it from me. You guys need to investigate this and do a big story." It's like, whoa. Like, we get this stuff all the time. We have a finite amount of resources and we have to pick and choose where we're going to allocate those resources. So if you want to worry about the Freemasons and, corruption at a high level over in Europe and that sort of thing, all the power to you. But there's something, again, this is an Andy Stump thing, which he calls the circle principle. So it's your circle of concern, your circle of control, and your circle of influence. Is that a lot of people are living their lives in their circle of concern where they have no control and they have no influence over. So essentially you're wasting your time. So the way we approach things is we have to say, okay, circle of control, that's you, how you conduct yourself and how you interact with people on a daily basis. Your circle of influence is like your family, your friend circle, and then it actually goes up to social media, and the stuff we're doing at Veterans for Freedom is where we can influence people in a positive way. Is like, if we just spent all of our time in the area of concern, we would accomplish nothing because we're not working within our circles of control and our circle of influence. So we get all this stuff sent to us all the time. They want us to open up like investigations into like this crazy stuff that is just in our circle of concern. Like, we can't do it. Sorry.
Yeah. And since they're talking about the Freemasons, I mean, because I think they're kind of saying like we don't even want to look at that stuff or whatever. But I mean, I personally know Freemasons in the military, and they're my buddies, and they're good guys as far as I can tell, and everything like that. And it is kind of a thing. Like, you got to wonder what the dynamic is like when the master corporal is the master mason and the chief warrant officer is his understudy. Like, so yeah, there's a little bit of that stuff. But this idea that the Freemasons are running the country behind the scenes or anything like that. I think that they may have some influence, but they're not nearly as influential as they were even like 100 years ago or something like that. And basically my understanding is that they're the remnants of it's the traditions of the the Knights Templar, right? I mean, Jacques de Molay was burned at the stake in 1307 on Friday the 13th, and the whole allegory around Hiram Abiff and being assassinated at the Solomon's Temple and stuff, I think is really a reference to the burning at the stake of the leader of the Knights Templar. And a lot of them immigrated, and they fled to the New World, and there's Oak Island and stuff like that, and the other ones went underground. And I'm pretty sure Freemason is just a mistranslation to the French for frère maison, like a fraternity. Yeah. But yeah,
if to these people who do this is like, hey, if you want to give us $5 million to run our organization, we can stand up a large media wing. We can hire reporters, investigative journalists. We can get all sorts of people out there. We have a big membership, lots of guys and gals willing to do things. If you want to do that for us, okay, maybe we could talk about it. But don't try and crap all over us because we're not looking into your individual story or your Pfizer document, this, whatever it is. do it yourself and then let us know. And maybe if it's good enough, we'll share it. But we just get inundated in information saturation about all sorts of crazy stuff, like the gay frogs, you name it.
I'm just kind of throwing that in there. I don't want to go down a rabbit here, guys, but yeah, I mean, I'm pretty conversant in a lot of this stuff. I've always been a little bit of an information addict, and I can see this. Yeah, like the Mason stuff is sometimes suspicious, but I did my deep dive on that, and I'm not really concerned about them.
Yeah, I'm all about going down rabbit holes and investigating and learn some stuff as long as you can come back out of them. But my favorite one that I get a laugh out of, they're like there's some like nut job on Instagram who writes like these novels on our posts there, and I just wait for him to do like 5 or 6 of them, and then I just delete them because I'm just trolling the guy. But his big thing, he's like, oh look, they have the UN leaves on their logo. These guys are working for the UN. Look, they're tying it together. And then he goes off on these long spiels and emails about how we work for the United Nations. Like the United Nations, everyone, we'll do more informative videos on this down the road.
Yeah.
They don't have a standing military. They don't have a standing force. They weren't sent to Ottawa. Those foreign people who were speaking a different language, they were French. Okay. They're from Quebec.
Northern Quebec.
It wasn't brought in from this. I was there. Jeff was there. We saw it with our own eyes. And so these people just get on these like conspiracy theory tangents. And I'm not saying, there's like a spectrum of conspiracy theory, but just these accusations and stuff, it's like, it's laughable. And it just, all it does is consume our resources. So when you send us this stuff, a lot of the time we'll read the bluff or the bottom line up front. We'll read the first paragraph, and then we'll just delete it because we don't have the time or the resource to allocate to that.
Yeah, and it really is about what we can confirm, and we apply the same professional standards that we did in our military careers when we're gathering intelligence and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, like there is no file in the intelligence community on the Freemasons, I doubt. So so that's about the size of it. And I'm sorry, I don't want to like.
No, I got off on a tangent. I got off a tangent too because I just read this nut job's comments.
I like to engage in the comments. I think that's an important part of what we do. But I'll throw to the next article here, Drew. Let's see. Okay, so here we have CTV News. Title is, "We've Got to Grow. Anand says CAF must recruit more troops amid heightened global uncertainty." Yeah, right. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
So I'll just read the first few paragraphs, I think, and then I'll throw it back to you. Ottawa National Defence Minister Anita Anand says there's an urgent need to attract more Canadian Armed Forces personnel amid, quote, "clear and present," close quote, "danger to the rules-based international order." Quote, "We've got to grow this thing," close quote, she said in an Ottawa-based defense conference on Friday. Quote, "And I'm not going to do everything I can with I am going to do everything I can with General Wayne Eyre and the broader defense team to make sure that happens," close quote. The defense minister spoke about Russia's ongoing unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and how the events of the past 2 weeks have triggered reflections about how Canada should re-envision its defense strategy. Well, I think re-envision was kind of where we went wrong in the first place. Now we've got to un-re-envision the military and start getting back to being a serious fighting force. But I'll throw that over to you for comment there.
So Op Reassurance, which I was there, that was my last deployment, 2016, 2017. And that was to stop Russian aggression. We had sailed, I think we were the first ship to sail through the Turkish Straits since their coup that had happened, or their attempted coup there. And we were in the Black Sea. We were taking part in something called Operation Seabreeze, which was just basically sitting right on the Russian border and just sort of provoking them with SNMIG, or Standing Maritime, a NATO Maritime Group 2, I think we were part of. And actually, I won't speak too much of that. We did have MiGs and stuff flying over us, but I digress. So the problem with that, with the statement from Anita, who has no military experience whatsoever, is they're kicking out all of these CAF members, probably going to be up to 3,000, over the vaccine mandate. So they're getting 5 Foxtrot, or they're being forced to go 4 Charlie, and we're already in dire need of troops, or recruiting's low. As of March 16th, the 365-day rolling average of releases within the CAF was at 11%, which is double. And they're kicking out these people, a lot of them trained, thousands and thousands of years probably worth of experience. And then they turn around and say, okay, well, we need people. It's like, well, maybe you have to do stop the order, which we already know is coming in September with the leaked Camp4 Gen saying, okay, well, unvaccinated people can join or can stay in the military, but they're still moving ahead with all these releases, and they're kicking these people out, which is ridiculous. And if you like, I remember a buddy of mine said he goes, hey, if you wanted to really get good quality people in the CAF and get them in, he goes, you just line everyone up, and he goes, you have a sergeant, a warrant officer, a petty officer, just walk through the line, and basically they'd be able to look at them and say who'd be a good fit within the military within a couple questions. But it's just this woke garbage. The divisive policies that they're forcing on it, like, people don't want to join. And the thing is, a lot of people have like generational families where you join, then your kids join, and then your brother, or that sort of thing. A lot of guys and gals getting out now, like myself included, say don't join, right? And it's because of this stuff. So she's just saying, oh, well, we need more people, we need to grow, and that sort of thing. It's like, if you looked at it at a chart there, you could actually see, I'm assuming you could see the correlation between when you're enforcing these policies, this woke cultural Marxist nonsense on the military, and tying it into recruiting, and then tying it into retention rates, as well as people releasing, because I'm a firm believer that there would be a correlation there.
Oh, 1,000%. And everybody kind of, all the NCOs and stuff that I know around my level, when I was getting out and around my age, they're all saying the same thing. Like, the writing is on the wall. This isn't what I signed up to do. And it's demoralizing. Like, they're keeping people from having the military careers that they want, that they're trying to pursue. I mean, it's just so wrong-headed. And what I hear a lot, what I heard throughout the course of my career, is this kind of scapegoating, where, every time a new generation of soldiers comes in, they're like, oh yeah, this generation, they're not going to be good. There's a lot of talk about how Canadians just, aren't that interested in military service, and, we're not that kind of country and stuff like that. But that's not what it is. That's not what it is at all. It's just that we don't really have a real military for those kinds of people to serve in. And the way that they treat those of us who want to serve is the entire issue around retention. I mean, you look at something like the Canadian Forces Personnel Appraisal System that we use to evaluate our people for promotion. And we get ordered by the generals every year to cut corners on the administrative process in order to save them the effort of earning their 6-figure salaries. They're doing boards 6 weeks before the end of the reporting period and telling people, oh yeah, you're totally getting treated fairly, and this is 100% above board and in accordance with the rules, when it is absolutely not. And I know that for a fact, based on the results of at least 1 or even 2 grievances that I filed. But yeah, the idea is that the lower ranks are there to make the higher ranks look good. And the whole thing is kind of dehumanizing for people who sign up to serve. So that's the real issue. That's what's really going on there, guys. And it's only going to get worse, because they seem to think that they need to do more of this stuff. But this stuff is the problem. Wouldn't you say, Drew?
Yeah. Just to touch on your SIF pass point is, you're doing PDRs every quarter, PERs, they're going up and back. It's like, it's too much, in my personal opinion. It's too much of a burden to do all that stuff. You have all your sailors, and then you have, positions that aren't filled, and you're in charge of, 2 debts instead of 1. And instead of doing your job, you're spending so much time doing, admin, paperwork, using SIF pass and that sort of thing. And I think, and I know every year it's like, oh, here's the new guidance, you do this, use these words. It's like you're taking 2 days just to study the guidance of how to do it, and then you got to write these reports, and it goes up. It's too much of a burden, in my opinion. And you just can't you can't manage it. And PDRs just get administered. Like 50% of your time, if you're in an office setting, is dealing with this sort of stuff, and it, in my opinion, is too much.
Yeah, but I would offer you a counterpoint that it's completely mismanaged, and that's at the highest level. They can't do their jobs; they never could. And you know, they could have put me in charge of DMCSS2 when I was a master corporal, and I would have had every problem they had with that system sorted out in a month. And you know, I could do a presentation on that at some time if anybody wants to call me out on that. I literally, like when I was a sergeant major, I went in front of people with 2 documents. I made an aid memoir and a PDF for your PER form, and I made a spreadsheet that could allow you to select from drop-down menus, like the different phrases that you were going to use and stuff like that. Nice. And it was slick as a snot. And everybody looked at it and they were like, "Wow, that, like this is what we need to be doing." And I was like, "Yeah, guys, it's not hard. They just can't lead and they can't manage." I hear a couple more things about the Freemasons in there. And, I'm not going to, but I'm just going to say I didn't do a deep dive on the Freemasons and come up with nothing. Okay? I think that they were instrumental in the French Revolution and in the American Revolution, but they've since, like, their relevance has since waned. So that's all. Okay.
The comments are so funny. It's actually
I enjoy it. Yeah.
This is the first time I've done this. It's
I know,
and it's pretty laughable.
And I got a warrior's heart, buddy. I'm in it for the fight, you know. So
it's like we say we're not going to please everyone, and we get a ton of incoming flack. It's probably like 90% positive, 10% negative, and you know, they'll come with these statements and attack us, and it's like we're a pretty resilient bunch. It literally has zero effect on us. We're not we're not these like woke things. Oh, we're going to be victims and that sort of thing. You're just wasting your time by sending us that stuff, because we have, like I like to say, not me personally, but we have guys and gals who've taken incoming enemy fire. Your comments and things are not going to have any effect on our group. So
no.
Anyways, I digress.
But I do like to throw the trolls in there. I think it's important to address our detractors and stuff like that. I don't want anybody to think that I'm ducking them, you know. And it's our show, right? It's not my show. I try to do this sort of for everybody in V4F and in the country.
Yeah, so. Fair.
So we have this article here from John Robson over at the National Post. It says, "Liberals are infecting our military and police with forces with wokeism. We will all pay the price." Boy, oh boy, that is a pretty succinct headline there. What the government is determined to fix is not the military's capabilities as a force, but its lack of social justice. And by the way, social justice is just boomer justice. It's scapegoating the millennials for the crimes of the boomers. Just look up the statistics generationally on crime and line them up like that. And we'll see who is in a position to lecture who on their sexual ethics there, Wiener and Vance. Oh, God. Okay, so here we go. Years ago, American political philosopher Harvey Mansfield made a troubling observation that I cited in these pages 5 years ago. In case you've forgotten, the events conspire to remind you that I quote a paragraph not in the original, quote, "It may be possible to impose perfect justice, but people may not be in a mood to live together when you are finished," close quote. For instance, in the Canadian military. The armed forces might seem an odd place to make the experiment, but nowadays the government is imposing wokeism everywhere it can, with results that seem to be vindicating Mansfield painfully, as moral and preparedness plummet in tandem. Morale and preparedness, my apologies. As my Post colleague Matt Gurney wrote on Sunday, the feds just put an extra $8 billion into defense. But, quote, "We could skip right past the billions and authorize $8 trillion in a new defense spending and not actually make any tangible progress because the systems that sustain the military are dysfunctional, if not outright broken," close quotes, he wrote. You might suppose that a mere $8 billion under current circumstances for what Gurney rightly calls unspecified purposes indicates that the Trudeau Liberals are not serious about fixing the military. But they are. Just not its capacity to break things and hurt people, despite Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's quote, very uncertain 21st century, close quote. What they are determined to fix is the lack of social justice. They really seem convinced that if identity politics crushes all opposition, there will be such a flowering and true human fulfillment that lack of modern equipment, logistical support, or actual soldiers will be of no importance in safeguarding our security. It's not working in any sense. The military is just incapable of fighting. It seems incapable of controlling sexual harassment, with one senior officer after another going up in flames. That's because it was the boomers, and still is. Arguably, the sort of, quote, leaders who are capable of securing advancement by promising to make an army a, quote, safe space are highly unlikely to have the character necessary to impose and enforce exacting standards of any sort, especially against the demands of their political masters to prioritize the wrong things in the wrong way. This is really good. It's a problem throughout the federal bureaucracy. Everything is exquisitely politically correct, and yet, despite lavish remuneration and ridiculous job security, polls repeatedly find that the mood and ethics to be dismal. The solution, naturally, is further assault on patriarchal bigotry in the belief that perfect justice is just one seminar and 3 pronouns away. But what if it's not? Frankly, if the Department of Prairie's Economic Development Canada sank into demoralized paralysis, the world might not find out for decades. The economy might even benefit. But what if policing collapses? Blacklock's just reported on testimony before Commons Human Resources Committee that RCMP applications have plummeted sharply. The testimony was given at the head of the Mounties Union, who has a vested interest in the size of the force and used social justice language. But we should still give serious attention to his claims, including, quote, policing is no longer considered as an attractive career as it used to be. Police services across North America are seeing a decline in applicants. Why should such a thing happen? Despite a certain faddish youth enthusiasm for getting rid of police a couple of years back, even most silly people realize that we need someone to enforce the rules. But who? I think policing, like soldiering, used to attract mostly serious, stoic applicants willing to endure hardships to protect order against chaos. But if so, those professions are unlikely to appeal to social justice warriors. And if only social justice warriors need apply, you'll wind up with an inadequate pool of unsuitable applicants trickling into institutions that spectacularly fail to deliver either on those ostensible mandate or on social justice, becoming instead dungeons whose occupants are in no mood to live together, let alone do their jobs, under leaders unfit to inspire them to do either. Mansfield's insight might be called conservative since it relies implicitly on human nature being both flawed and intractable. But if so, more people should be conservative because the predictable impact of woke policies is to foster petty resentment that doesn't even help the supposed direct beneficiaries. As Terry O'Neill wrote in a BC report nearly 30 years ago, quote, victimhood is the devil on your shoulder, whispering in your ear that you're damaged goods, close quote. If in consequence you will spend your days convinced that people hate you and are tormenting you in petty ways with, quote, microaggressions, close quote, you will be a misery to others and burden yourself. And no organization that is primarily a nonviolent version of a Chinese cultural revolutionary re-education session can possibly fulfill any constructive purpose. The Mounties won't combat fiscal or cybercrime, nor the military foreign enemies, or be in any mood to get along with one another, not even if you give them 8 trillion. That's a good article. I really like that. I think he really hits the nail on the head in a couple of spots there. It really is the wokeness, I think, that makes policing so unattractive. And I'm glad he highlights the Black Lives Matter protests as well from a couple of years ago, because they're coming out screaming with their pitchforks and their torches for the police, and nobody's going to bat for the police. They're just getting thrown under the bus. And that's pretty much the same thing that we saw in the military, at least throughout my entire career, is Anytime some wokester goes after somebody in uniform, the leadership will just throw them right under the bus, give them some BS administrative measures, whatever they got to do to just kind of make it go away for themselves. Anytime I've ever seen a leader have the choice between doing the right thing and the easy thing, they will choose the easy thing every time. And that always involves throwing the little guy under the bus, or well, for the most part, I guess. But yeah, I'll throw that over to you, True, for comment.
Yeah, so that's that article was an excellent article. The guy summarized it very well, and it just ties back into what we've been saying this entire stream, is that we are all to pay down the road when all we have is a woke military, a woke police force, and they're not focused on their primary roles and their social contracts they've made to take care of Canadians, both at home and abroad. And we're going to see this all just come crashing down if we don't do, if the government doesn't sort of do a course correction on this. And like I said earlier, the issue I have is when we get older, we need the police to be able to do their job and the military to be able to do their job. And I did an article on this with Barbara Kay at the Epic Times a couple months ago. And I had said at the time that this looks like the managed decline of the military. And one of the things I told her is, like, if you were going to, sort of hurt the military or the police, would you do anything different from what you're doing now? And I'm not saying like it could be drastic. You can disarm or sort of dismantle, and then that's pretty obvious. But they're slowly doing this so that people aren't sort of tracking and they're not aware. Just like all the other stuff that they've been doing in our society. It's like the boiling frog, slowly boiling the frog or throwing the frog into the boiling water analogy. And that's what they're doing. And they're purging, getting people out, and they're getting people in social justice warriors. They're getting the force and the diversity, inclusion, equity, Marxist nonsense on everyone. And that's why people are getting out, because they're seeing, and this is why I think the attrition rate is so high in the CAF, is because we've been away from that stuff, and now it's being forced on us, and then people are just sick and tired of it. Like I was talking about the black leading seaman who's a buddy of mine who got out over it, and they're just saying, okay, well, this is our new ideology, let's force it on people and see, and the people who don't like it are going to quit and they're going to get out, and then we're only going to hire people back who believe in the woke cult nonsense.
Yeah, and that is Stalinism. That's exactly what Stalin did with the purge of the military. He purged it of all potential dissidents, and that's what our military is currently inching toward, is this kind of ideological homogeneity. And all that's going to be left are the people who will just do and think whatever they are told. So these could be some pretty dark days ahead of us, especially when you consider things in the historical context. And I'll add that I actually think it's pretty dire, even in comparison to Stalinism, because we had a purge of the military back in the 90s with the Forces Reduction Plan after the Somalia affair, after the boomers gave us the Somalia affair. And so what happened then is a lot of the guys that were my generation who saw the corruption, and other generations as well, back in the 90s, they were just a little ahead of me. They all saw the corruption and they left. And then when I got in, and I was looking around like, what the hell happened to everybody? Why are they all fat and inept? Well, I started kind of putting it together with the Forces Reduction Plan, because there were financial incentives for people to voluntarily release. And so a lot of folks would have taken the 10 grand and started a business or something like that. A lot of the go-getters, a lot of the people who pursue incentives, they would have been gone. And basically all the people who knew that they would starve to death if they ever had to make it in the real world, they're who led me throughout my career. So that's kind of what's going on, is these kind of highly compliant types who need to remain ensconced in the most paternalistic institution in Canada. They're the ones who are running it right now, and you can tell them to do anything, and they're just going to do it. So That's what's going on with this wokeness. It's they're pushing this down. None of them are ever going to stand up to their bosses and say that there's something wrong with this. They're just going to do whatever it takes to get that promotion, pension, and the likes. And it's very destructive and polarizing. I'm the guy who got off that crazy train when they brought in the microaggressions training with all the critical race theory and stuff like that. And I can tell you from what I saw that it was utterly polarizing, even in the group that all we had were the most highly educated leaders of the unit in there. Now what's happening now, I didn't get to see the full fallout of it because, I wasn't even sure I could tell what was real at that point. My mental health was so much in the shitter. But what I hear is happening is that, it's just created this parallel complaints process that is just taken up everybody's time. They're completely bogged down with complaints about microaggressions because they're imaginary, and that we can't function as a fighting force. They're not performing their basic functions in terms of protecting the country anymore. It's all about the wokeness. So that's what I see is happening. It seems like you say, if they were planning to manage the decline of the military to the point that it is completely and utterly dysfunctional without raising too many alarm bells with the general public, what would they be doing differently than that?
Yeah, exactly.
Right now. Yeah.
Let's bog them down with this diversity, inclusion, equity training, get everyone demoralized. People demoralized, they're going to quit. We'll keep the other people, bog them down, like you said, microaggressions. I think in some of the correspondence that has been sent to me, there's a certain timeline for grievances or things, and then they're actually putting or dealing with complaints, and they're putting in there like saying, as per this, it's this is the timeline we're supposed to respond. But because of an increased, but because of COVID, which is an excuse for everything, but because of an increased workload, we're adding like 390 days or 180 days to our response time. So that's all that's happening is they're just getting bogged down, and our military is not focusing on what our primary role is, which is to protect Canadian citizens and Canadian interests, both at home and abroad. And so we're just getting bogged down with all this stuff. And then, it's, I don't know the way out of it other than getting some strong leadership pushing back, but I don't even know if that's the way, because look what happened with Mark Norman, which is something we'll talk about at a different day. We'll do a deep dive into that story.
I know all about it.
Is he was pushing back against something, and what happened? The RCMP raided his house, terrified. And this is a vice chief of defense staff. They embarrassed him and scared him and his family and destroyed this guy's career because he decided to push back a bit, right? So that was just them scaring the senior leadership, saying, hey, if you don't do what you're told, if there's any sort of pushback or whatever, we're going to destroy your career like we did Mark Norman.
Yeah, that's right. And buy him off. I mean, he stuck to his guns. He got the best lawyer in the country there, Marie Heinen, and they were going to war, but in the end, they bought him off. Yeah.
Well, the thing, it wasn't even a buy off. The type of man that Norman was they said, okay, well, what's next? He wanted his job back. He didn't want any money.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was like, oh, I would like my job back as a vice CDS, because then he would have been our CDS and he would have had a strong, no nonsense naval warfare officer in charge, who was very well respected and loved within the Navy. But they couldn't have that, right? So that's why they did have to do a settlement, pay him off, because they weren't going to give him his job back.
Yeah, no, I know, and that is what I'm talking about. I know that he went back for that, and it's just that I remember him saying during the press conference that he had a story to tell Canadians, and they would be sharing his story with Canadians, and then he took the settlement, and we never heard from him.
Yeah, there's probably a non-disclosure agreement or something like that. But I think his story will come out eventually.
I think I understand his story, actually. I did a presentation on this when I was still in. I was the ethics guy at the unit, and I always made it a habit of like using real life stories and stuff like that in the ethics presentation and talking about why ethics is important. And what I saw happen with the Mark Norman case, it was just, I don't think anybody was even mindful of the kind of egregious abuses they were engaged in. I think they were just sort of trying to get in good with the big guy and have a really strong penchant for this kind of thing naturally. You know, they look up the ladder, the chain, and it's almost like they kind of deify our leaders and stuff like that, as if they couldn't be wrong or something. But it was basically just kind of something that the prime minister said, like, I think this is going to lead to charges, and something about leaking secrets. And then the Privy Council office is the one making the call to the RCMP, and the RCMP were the ones who pursued it. And they even had at one point the Crown Prosecutor of Ontario was invoking attorney-client privilege with the Privy Council office and the PMO. And it's like, no, you don't work for those guys. You work for the taxpayer of Ontario. Like, this is a clear conflict of interest. And that was when things really kind of turned around for Norman. And so I think that's really what it was, is we have a kind of cultural issue in the government in particular in Canada, where, you know, it's sycophantic. It's throne sniffing. They're just trying to get in good with the big guy. Please their boss, and in this case, pleasing their boss meant throwing a good man under the bus and terrorizing his family in the middle of the night. So that's kind of where we're at with this right now. And Mark Norman, I agree, he was a really solid officer. I think that he was pretty exceptional, and a lot of that came from the fact that he enlisted as an ordinary seaman, like a private. He started off as an unenlisted guy. And so he has a kind of, he's really in touch with the kinds of hardships that a lot of people face further down in the ranks, and the kinds of impacts that bad senior decision makers can really have on morale and effectiveness of the unit. I really think that he was one of those guys who got it. And he really did take a good principled stand against all the most powerful people in the country at the time, and save the Navy with the refuelers that they have now, the Asterix, and what's the other one?
Just the Asterix. That's all we have. We lost Protector and Preserver. But
oh, that's right. Yeah.
But the thing is, some of the best officers I've worked with and who have had a large impact on my career have been officers who commission from the ranks, 100%, because they understand both worlds. So yeah, definitely shout out to those who do that. And
I want to throw to a comment here. Cindy says, what can we do? So we do talk about this, and you know, this is one of those things that we're building. We're hoping we can provide you guys with some documentation, some tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, as we say in the military, for lawful civic action, the kind, the likes of which we're advocating for here at V4F. But yeah, put pen to paper, guys. I've been saying, you know, file your complaints. You can file police complaints. You can file human rights complaints, you know, like through your provincial human rights tribunals, or under the Canadian Human Rights Act. You can take your fines. You can go to court. Start fighting back, and make sure you're not just, you know, writing to your MP. If you're going to write anything to your MP, you make sure that it's something that's going to come back to bite them, something that's going to make them look bad if it ever gets out. That's about the only point of doing anything there. But if you engage in these legal processes that actually have some teeth and have to bear fruit at some point, then I think that's probably the way forward. You know, and you can call out Anita Anon. You can write to her if you want to and tell her that this stuff is killing our military and it's all terribly corrupt, if you like to. But certainly just get engaged and put pen to paper. And
we have some more stuff coming, because we did Canada Divided video. I think it was,
that's right.
We got over 100,000 combined views so far, so that really took off.
That's great.
Yeah. We have a couple intermediate videos that we're planning, and then we have sometime in September we're going to have the Canada United video coming out, and it talks to some of the TTPs and things we can do as a country and citizens of this country to put the pressure on the government. But we're going to see something big in September with the inquiry into the use of the Emergencies Act. So that's going to be pretty significant. We have a bunch of Veterans Freedom members who are going to be testifying at that. And I know it's hard because people they want to get in, they want to do things, they want to protest, and I completely understand, and all the power to you if it's a peaceful, non-threatening protest, and get out there and have your voice be heard. But you look at the government is on the ropes right now with everything coming out from whether it's the RCMP to Mendocino and all these people. They're on the ropes and they're feeling it. So we need to keep that pressure up but go through the actual legal processes that are in place to expose these people for I like to call them traitors, but not everyone does. That's what we refer to Trudeau at my last posting was the traitor to the nation. So
well, he doesn't serve the same cause as the rest of us.
No.
So
well, the interesting thing is the article, Jeff, that came out I think a day or two, where the ex-CSIS guy came out and made comments that the bureaucrats at all levels, the elected officials at all levels, some of them are responsible to foreign powers. Like that's huge. People, that is like unbelievable that you have an the head of CSIS or whoever he was come out and say that, and there's gonna be more digging, and you got people looking into this stuff. It's all coming out, and the people are waking up, and so you just got to be patient as this takes its course.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been hearing a lot about that, about the kind of mounting frustration where people are saying, nothing's happening, and a lot is happening. You're not going to see it in the mainstream media, of course. But you got Brian Peckford's charter challenge is there. You've got the inquiry into the invoking of the Emergencies Act. There are other legal challenges out there, like all over the country, and they're starting to bear fruit now. The Peckford case in particular, like they've got the provincial health officers on the stand, and in cross-examination, they're just falling apart. They don't have an empirical leg to stand on in terms of justifying their decisions. It's going to take time, guys. But that's the only way to a peaceful resolution. Okay, is we got to engage in these processes, and we have to let them run their course. Now, we can probably expect, since we're talking about the fall, and I know there were kind of rumors about a fall election, so that would be the kind of dirty trick that we've seen from the government in the past, where everything was coming out about the Winnipeg lab leak and its connection to Wuhan, China. There, the Wuhan lab. To shut down that inquiry, I think that's the reason they called the last election, because now they have to, all those committees are dissolved. We have an election. There are new people now, and now they've got to reestablish them. So it will have to go forward again at some point. But if they can just keep calling elections, ad infinitum, then they never really go anywhere. So that might be a stalling tactic that we'll see again. But things are moving, and big things are happening, no doubt about it.
And I talked to one of our members who's heavily involved in the testimony that's going to be happening about the emergency, or like Jeff said, the invoking of the Emergencies Act. They've seen the government sort of response, or the line that they're taking. It is paper thin, quote unquote paper thin, and that's coming from some of the lawyers. And they're basically, what I was told to me yesterday was like, the government does not want this to happen. And you even saw another article where they talked about and saying there was actually a breakthrough, I think, to a peaceful resolution. That's what sort of was being told to the government, which was probably true. I can't comment on that too much, but they went ahead and did it anyways, right? So there's all sorts of stuff coming. We're going to have, the next couple months are just going to be huge. And like I said earlier, the government is definitely on the ropes.
And we're talking about serious consequences for, very powerful people. This has teeth. So it's just a matter of allowing the process the time that it needs to go through the evidence. I just kind of want to take some time to dispel this idea that it's all going to happen overnight with a single protest or with a single action. Like, this is a war. These are battles. We're talking about a rhetorical war or an ideological war at this point. It's not kinetic. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to win a war in a single Hail Mary battle. It just doesn't work that way. You need to be strategic. You need to be reasonable, logical, and yeah, we've got to understand that it's going to take time, and we need to be strategic. You know, I think patience really is a virtue for probably that reason. Yeah, but yeah, I think we pretty much hit everybody in the chat here, and that's the last of our articles for today. I'll throw it to you for a final comment there, Drew, since I'm taking up plenty of their time here. But go ahead.
Well, I'll just yeah. So just maybe 3 points here. One, so when we talk about the long game here, just remember it's a collective of people, of organizations, of whether it's an individual person filing a lawsuit or it's an organization doing it. There's lots of work going on behind the scenes. It's definitely just not Veterans for Freedom. In fact, we're probably playing with the exception of a couple of our members, we're playing a much smaller role, and we never claim that we're playing this big role, but we are talking to a lot of people, and we do have some key strong key people who are definitely, like someone like Tom Quiggin, who is going to be playing a role there in September. And but it's a collective effort from the Canadian people who are going to make this happen. We just have to keep our heads cool and be patient. And the other second point, I know it's sort of just off topic for this chat, but just want to give a shout out to the truckers. I know, like us, we're focusing a lot, veterans and what we're doing, and some of the other veterans who are out there fighting. But none of this would have happened if it wasn't for the truckers. And when I talk to people, I try to make sure I point that out, because they're the ones who saw what was happening, got organized, and went into Ottawa and kicked this whole thing off. Veterans for Freedom came from the trucker organization, or from the trucker convoy. All sorts of organizations have come from there. They really woke people up and got people moving, because they actually stood up, and instead of staring at that line, they made an attempt to cross it. And too many people go through their lives just staring at that line, never cross it. So just want to give kudos to the truckers and the people who went out there, and not just the truckers, even though they were sort of the high value units there, all the people that came out to support them. We had people living there in their four-wheelers and everything. So the whole Freedom Convoy, just want to give a shout out to them. And I try to do that every time, because they're the ones who, like I said, made this happen. And then lastly, so Veterans for Freedom, we have a new webpage coming. We're sort of doing a bit of a shift in the organization, doing a bit of a reorg, just because we're getting too big in terms of membership, which is a good problem to have. And I know there's veterans in there, chatting away, and we get a lot of flack from other veterans and stuff. So I just want to leave it at, our organizations does not speak for all veterans. We speak for a group of veterans who are concerned about the direction our country is heading. We have just approaching 2,000 member applications. And with a recent census, they're estimating there's 460,000 veterans in Canada. So it's less than 0.5%. So just keep that in mind. We don't talk for all veterans, just our group, but it's growing steadily. Who knows, maybe in a couple of years, we will be a large 5 or 10% of the representing 5 or 10% of the veterans in Canada. So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Drew. Yeah, we're Veterans for Freedom. We're not the veterans who are not for freedom. And just for me personally, I don't really consider those guys veterans. I mean, if you didn't get in it to serve the cause of human dignity, then you didn't get in it for the right reasons. And as far as I'm concerned, you're not a real veteran. Probably just some MIR commando who's sucking a pension.
No, I won't comment on that. I won't comment on that.
No, that's just me.
Because we actually have, maybe, so this is the last thing, and I saw her in the chat, this girl, this lady Shannon, and so she was like, she applied, and she did like the reserve entry officer training plan, like some
Mhm.
crazy thing that hardly like anyone goes through. And she went to RMC, but then because she was reserved, she didn't have to do any service after, and she had applied to us and written this long letter about why she should be in, and we were like pushing back saying no, sorry, you can't, whatever.
Mhm.
And then basically I told her, I said, yeah, if you're a veteran, you have to go get your NDI 75 and get a veterans card. And sure enough, I got the email with a picture of her, of her card.
Oh, wow.
So, but anyways, no, she's great. Like, we met her,
Yeah, yeah.
she's awesome. Her and her husband are great. And so we had to let her in because she did have the vets card. But it's just a funny story.
Yeah. I mean, under the charter, you only have to have graduated basic training and been honorably released to qualify for veteran status. But
kudos to her. Kudos to her going through the process to get the card and get in and prove us wrong. So,
and you know, if you're on the right side of things, like, you know, the whole thing is we all accepted unlimited liability on behalf of Canadians when we put on the uniform to go overseas. And you know, I think if you're one of those people who did that to serve the cause of human dignity, like this person is doing now, then yeah, you're in the right camp. You're okay with me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're at like 2 hours. The dogs are getting antsy.
All right, I'll leave you go then, brother. Thanks a lot for being so generous with your time here, Drew.
Yeah.
And you troops, you stay frosty and stay safe.